Hey guys, it's Cheer, and welcome to What I Wish I Knew Before Hiking the CDT. Today we are going to be talking about timing, which is sometimes an issue for hikers, not issue, but just one of the challenges that hikers have to overcome when they're hiking a 3,000 mile trail. So I'm going to give you my experience, which is a little bit different. I did more sections. So I did the first half of the CDT northbound in 2021, and I did the second half in 2022, also northbound. And even though I had more of a section experience, I did do larger sections, obviously, and I did keep up with the hikers who kept hiking because I started with the bubble in New Mexico in 2021. And so I kept up with the hikers as they were hiking too. So they gave me accounts of their experiences, like in the San Juans during the, crazy snow in May when they entered and that sort of thing. So I definitely got insight from them as they were still hiking because I kept in contact with them. And this video, I guess this is my way of saying this video is still going to be good for hikers who are hiking all the way through in 1 year. And it's also going to be good for hikers who want to section, because I feel like I did a lot of the sections in more ideal times of the year versus when you're hiking, a 3,000 mile trail. You don't really have much of a choice on when you're going to be where, because you got to finish the thing before the first snow comes. If you're hiking a northbound hike, before the first snow comes in Montana, or if you're hiking a southbound hike, you really want to get through the San Juans, which is in Colorado, before that snow hits. So it's a little bit of a race against time, but the hikers that I've talked to did mention that if they did do kind of the whole thing in 1 year, it was a challenge, but it also was obviously, for most hikers, a tiring experience, but also a great experience. So just to be organized about this whole thing, I'm going to go through kind of an overview first, and then I'm going to get into each state. So New Mexico is the first state. So that's the first section I'll go over, and I'm going to kind of sprinkle in some videos of my starts and ends of each section, because I thought that'd be fun for you guys to see. Second, we have obviously Colorado, and the San Juans are kind of the big thing to think about when you're hiking the CDT northbound. And then we have Wyoming, which is the third. We have Idaho and southern Montana, and then we have Montana. So those are kind of like the 5 sections that, in my mind, and also on the Guthook app, or now it's called Far Out, the map that most hikers use to navigate these long trails. That's how this trail is sectioned up on the Far Out app as well. So I'm going to kind of split things up that way just to keep it organized and clear for you guys. And just before we get started, this actually addresses a question that I got in my last video from a wonderful subscriber wondering about the best times to section hike the trail. So this, like I said, is going to go over kind of sections, the best times to go, because I think I was probably in a lot of sections at the ideal time, luckily, because I broke it up. But so yeah, if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to address the questions that you guys have. So this is fun because I'm addressing someone's question and kind of having another umbrella to talk about timing as well for those folks who are going completely northbound or completely southbound in 1 year.
Are you kidding me with this view right now? Oh. It's the Gila. Wow.
So we're going general first. So let's talk about mileage, total mileage of the CDT, and what I found out as I was hiking. So the CDTC, which stands for the Continental Divide Trail Coalition, defines the whole trail as being 3,100 miles. What I found was on the Guthook or Far Out app, which is what we use to navigate on these trails, it was about 2,995-ish miles. So that was a difference. And I wasn't really sure why that was. And furthermore, what I found as I was hiking and finishing the trail is, since this is kind of a choose your own adventure trail, there's so many alternates you can take. And by the end, a lot of the hikers seemed to be tired. They were kind of not done with the trail, but they just kind of wanted to finish it as soon as they could, because, you know, you're fighting the snow at the end and weather, and your body is tired. You've been out there for months and months and months. So what I found was most hikers that I talked to actually did more like 2,700 miles on this trail, including myself. So I did take the alternates as well. In certain cases, in other cases not. So like I said, choose your own trail, choose your own adventure, hike your own hike, all that stuff. That's what everybody does, unless you're a purist. If you want to stay red, which is kind of the more pure way to hike the trail, you could also do that as well, and you'd be closer to like the 2,900 mark. But from what I found, most hikers did the 2,700 mile mark, including myself. Even though this is the case, this trail is still the longest of the big three trails: the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, Continental Divide Trail. So it's still the longest trail. So you do have to think about timing if you're doing this all in 1 year. So what I found as I was talking to hikers as they were doing their northbound hikes, the bubble that I was in, you know, I started with everybody and then I kept in contact with them over the months. It was still a struggle to complete in a timely manner, unless they were really focused on it. And I found that a lot of hikers started focusing on their mileage more in Wyoming. So after Colorado, which is crazy up and downs, you're hiking up at least 3 large passes a day. Your low is like 11,000 feet. Your high is, Gray's Peak was like 14,300 or something like that. So that's kind of the highest point on the trail. So you're kind of going up to 14,000 feet, 13,000 feet, 12,000 feet consistently in Colorado. So your mileage really, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too as we get into that, but your mileage will go down in Colorado. But once hikers got to Wyoming, you kind of drop down into the Great Basin for a couple weeks, and it's pretty flat in the basin. So a lot of hikers were starting to kind of plan out, okay, finish wise, like, where am I at here? Am I on track? Am I not? And so for the hikers who were thinking about that, they really upped their miles in the Great Basin in Wyoming in particular. So that was kind of one of the tactics. And also taking the alternates shave off quite a bit of mileage. So you can, if you're kind of running out of time, or you're kind of running behind in your mind, and you still want to make it to Canada before the first snowfall, which is generally, people say, the mid-September area. I finished September 6th. I'm looking at my notes because I can't remember all the dates. I finished September 6th and it was beautiful. But when I was hiking back out, because I finished there's like 2 different termini you can finish at. So I finished at the Waterton terminus. So I had to hike out of there. And so as I was hiking out of there for the next couple days to get to a road to get back into town, the weather just turned all of a sudden. So literally the day I got a hitch out of there, that area, the weather was turning. So generally it's good to plan as much as you can plan to finish the trail if you're hiking northbound, the beginning or mid-September. So this was a little bit of a struggle for some people. And if you do realize you're a little bit behind, the Great Basin in Wyoming is a great way to kind of make up some of that time. So that was just kind of my general findings as I was hiking the trail and as I was talking to hikers and that sort of thing. So now I'm going to go over state by state or section by section what my experiences were like, and this will help, full through hikers or section hikers.
Here we are at the terminus. Woo, Snickers! And he's got a Snickers. Very appropriate. How excited are you, Snickers?
Terminus. I'm not at all excited.
No,
I'm
not at all.
At all excited.
Not at all. Triple Crown, baby.
The first state, obviously, is New Mexico. So I started on April 5th and I ended the state May 16th. So I started with the bubble, actually a little bit before the bubble. Normally, at least the year I started hiking in 2021, the bubble was a week or week and a half after me, like the bigger bubble, but I did start in a smaller bubble, and I kept seeing the same hikers over and over again in town, which was really fun. But on trail, and I go over this in a previous video about seclusion, I wouldn't see anybody on trail really. It was just in town. So that was really nice. But it was great starting with a bubble because I got that trail community experience that I love. I also have a little organization or community called THRU-r, and it's all about the hiking community. So I love the community, and I loved having that experience on trail too. So it was great to start with the bubble. Wonderful time to start New Mexico. It was hot, but starting any later, I just can't even imagine how hot that would be. So I was really happy to start at the beginning of April. It was a really good time. So as far as mileage and terrain for New Mexico is 777 miles according to the Far Out app. I keep wanting to say Gut Hook, the Far Out app. So there are alternates that you can take, so it could be less than that. I think I did less. I think I did more like 700-ish miles. And something else I want to mention about New Mexico is it is very flat. So I was making the miles, I think on day 2 or 3, I did 28 miles, and I didn't even know, like, I didn't even realize how many miles I did. So it was almost like I don't want to say without even trying, because we're still obviously like tough, but you can really make miles in New Mexico. But the problem people have is once you're done with New Mexico, you hit Colorado. So you don't want to maybe enter Colorado too early. So there was kind of a struggle with that. Another thing to mention about New Mexico when I was ending, hiking into Cumbres Pass, which is the end point. Actually, it's after the end point. The official border is, I think, was it 3 miles before Cumbres Pass, where you can hitch back into Chama and resupply and that sort of thing. So the actual border and hiking to the border for about 2 days was in snow. And it was the year that I hiked in 2021, there was definitely a lot of post-holing going on. It was a little bit of a struggle. So like the last couple days in New Mexico is basically a taste of Colorado. If you're hiking all the way through, there most likely will be snow. So you get kind of a taste of what's coming in the San Juans.
Okay, here it is. Made it.
On to Colorado. So I ended up taking some time off for work reasons in between New Mexico and Colorado. So I actually got to go back to Colorado and do the state in the summertime. And I highly recommend, if you are section hiking the CDT or anywhere around the CDT, like in the San Juans and that sort of thing, the dates that I was there, I believe were just perfect. We got some crazy weather, but that's just how Colorado is. You're gonna get thunderstorms. I got hypothermia on one of the hotter days, and then a storm came in and I got hypothermic. So I had to jump in my tent and my sleeping bag to get dry and warm. So, that's just always gonna be, I think, a thing with Colorado. However, generally, the weather was amazing and there was nobody around, even though it was summertime. So I'm gonna take a step back though and talk about the people who went through, because I did keep in contact with them as they were hiking. So let's pretend like you're a northbound hiker and you're doing a continuous hike through the CDT. So the hikers that I spoke to who went through said the San Juans were quite challenging. The snow was very intense. They were post-holing. Some of them were using snowshoes, but eventually it just didn't make sense to carry the weight because they were still post-holing anyway. From what I understand, snowshoes are the most effective when you have more fresh powder versus maybe the conditions that they were in. So that's something to think about and research more. But the first, I'd say, section, a lot of hikers were just staying red and going the traditional CDT route. And then after that section, they dropped down because it was just a challenge. So it depends on your skill level, your comfort level, and all that sort of thing. So that's completely up to you as the hiker. You have to make that decision for yourself. But I found that a lot of hikers decided to drop down. There's different alternates you can take. I'm trying to remember the creed cutoff you could take to drop lower. And get away from some of the snow and that sort of thing. So that's something you definitely want to research. And water was also a challenge because everything was frozen. So getting water you know, you have to kind of melt the snow and all that sort of thing. So if you are doing a full through hike, just know that Colorado might be challenging, especially in the beginning. That's what I was hearing a lot of, was the beginning of Colorado, the first two sections, like going into Pagosa Springs and that sort of thing. It was pretty high snow. And I can't remember if 2021 was, I don't know if it was necessarily a high snow year. I think it was maybe just kind of more normal conditions. But that's just something to think about if you're doing a full hike through. It might just be more slow going, especially in the beginning because of the snow. But know that there are alternates for you to drop down if you need to, or there's like road walks and that sort of thing. If you have paper maps and you can kind of figure out like where you need to go, hikers were doing that too. So the stats, Colorado, according to Far Out, is 726 miles. And I was personally there from August 9th. I entered and I finished September 25th. So I was going probably lower mileage than most hikers that go through because I was kind of going from zero. I didn't have my trail legs anymore because I got off and got back on. So a lot of hikers will do a quicker time frame because I wasn't really making the miles as much because I didn't have my trail legs anymore. As far as Colorado mileage, your mileage is going to most likely go down because, you know, if you're hiking a northbound hike, you're used to kind of making the miles. It's dirt. You're not hiking on snow. It's pretty flat. So Colorado is a totally different story. So there's snow. If you're doing a traditional, just full through hike in 1 year, there's going to be snow. And the passes are very challenging. You have 3 to 5 usually passes a day that you're hiking. It's just up and down, up and down, up and down. It's at elevation. So your low, what I found is like 11,000 feet is your low. So you're spending more than a month most likely going up and down, up and down, up and down. So this is just to say that if your mileage goes down in Colorado, don't be discouraged because I would guess everybody's mileage goes down in Colorado. Mine certainly did because I'm affected by altitude. Let's say that you just bomb through New Mexico and then you hit Colorado, stand still, it's snow, nobody's gone through yet, you don't know what to do. There actually is something you can do, and quite a few hikers do this. So depending on conditions, obviously, you could always flip up to the Great Basin in Wyoming, and there are buses that can take you there and that sort of thing. So there are ways you can get there somewhat easily. So what you could do is you can go from Chama, which is on the border, is like the nearest town on the border of New Mexico and Colorado. You can go from Chama over to maybe Rawlins, or Encampment is one of the smaller towns that you get to in Colorado. I think it's actually the first, or I'm sorry, in Wyoming, it's the first major town you get to when you go into Wyoming. So Encampment or Rawlins, maybe the closer places you can get a bus to, but you could knock out hundreds of miles in the Great Basin because it's relatively flat. It's lower elevation than Colorado. The weather is still, and I'll go through this when we get to Wyoming, but the weather could still be pretty cold. There is snow in the Great Basin as well, but it is flat, and I would argue much easier hiking than Colorado. So that is an option. You can kind of knock out a couple hundred miles, a couple weeks of hiking while you're waiting for Colorado to thaw so you can enter.
Wyoming, here we come! Yeah! Ooh, there it is. Nice. Yes!
Wyoming, W-Y-O-M-I-N-G, Wyoming.
Yes, you spelled it correctly.
And on to Wyoming. So Wyoming is 508 miles as stated in the Far Out app. And I was in Wyoming. So I started Wyoming in 2022. So this was kind of the second leg of my hike. So 2021, that was pretty much New Mexico, Colorado. 2022 was Wyoming North. So I started June 15th through July 20th. This was a little bit early, so we were ahead of the bubble for most of the time in 2022 because I started in Wyoming all the way up to the border. So we were pretty much ahead of the bubble the whole way until we got to kind of like Idaho, Montana, and then the front runners were coming and passing us. So it was really fun to see that. But Wyoming, we were definitely ahead of the bubble. So I was making sure to make comments on all the water sources and everything because we were the first people through, essentially, me and my 2 hiking partners. So this time frame was actually really great to go through the basin. It was actually kind of colder. And I know the basin is more infamous for being really hot and exposed, and I can attest to the exposure. It is very exposed. So there are kind of like 2 legs to the basin, 2 kind of sections. So the first one is from Encampment to Rollins. Pretty exposed in that section. And then the second is Rollins to, let me think about this, Lander is the second kind of section. So from Rollins to Lander, we were talking to another hiker that was going southbound, and we were like, hey, what's up ahead? Because we had no clue, because nobody went through yet. And he was like, well, in this section, you know, it's hundreds of miles, there's might be 10 trees total. So that's how exposed it is. We didn't have much of a problem because the rainstorms kind of rolled through when it was like the hottest time of the day. So that was kind of nice. And then it got really cold. There was like such an extreme in temperature. So I'm glad I had all my gear. The water was great. It was plentiful at this time. So I would recommend going through if you're sectioning it. This time frame was great. There was still a little bit of snow, but we didn't necessarily have to like hike through a lot of it necessarily, just a little bit. So that didn't really slow us down much, but there was still a little bit of snow. So need to mention that. So June 15th, starting in Wyoming was great. That gives a thumbs up if you're doing a section hike. But for the folks that are doing a full through hike in 1 year, this was definitely a challenge for the hikers that I spoke to. The heat and the exposure was a challenge. So a lot of people will hike at night when it's cooler. So that's definitely something that the hikers that I spoke to recommended. So that's something you could do if you're doing a full hike to try to make the miles as well, because this is a flat area where you can make miles if you're kind of like worried about timing and that sort of thing.
Welcome to Idaho! Woo! Yeah! Woo!
Yeah.
Yay! Woo! Here we go.
Yeah. Moving on to the Idaho-Montana border. So this was something I didn't realize when I was prepping to hike and that sort of thing. I just realized it when I was on trail is there is a large section of the trail where you're kind of going back and forth right on the border. I didn't realize the Continental Divide was right on the border of Idaho and Montana in certain areas. So there were a lot of cases where I didn't even know what state I was in. So that was just a fun thing I noticed. But so I entered Idaho on July 20th and finished kind of the Idaho-Montana area on August 5th. So that is 403 miles, and give or take, because there are alternates and that sort of thing. So we took some alternates, so probably a little bit less. But this section I thought would be more flat than it actually was. So also very exposed in certain areas from like Lima, Lador area, extremely exposed. And actually, I had a tough time hiking in this section because it was like Colorado style ups and downs, very hot this time of year. So I don't know if I would necessarily recommend, like if you're a section hiker, going July 20th time frame. Maybe a little bit earlier in the year would be better for this section, just because I definitely got hot a lot and I was worried that I might get heat exhaustion and that sort of thing. I think I was on the brink a couple times and I didn't have my umbrella. So anyway, I don't know if section hiking wise, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend going in this time frame if you want to beat the heat. For the northbound hikers and also some of the southbound hikers, this is where the kind of Idaho, Montana, southern Montana area is where we were starting to see northbound wise, the front runners were catching up with us from the northbound hikers. So we had kind of the really fast hikers catching up with us in this section. So this kind of was when that bubble was hitting. And also in this section, we started seeing the southbounders and into Montana as well. As we hiked north, we kept seeing the southbounders. So that was really fun. And even the a couple of hikers we saw were doing the calendar year Triple Crown. We saw Quadzilla in the in Glacier. We saw the professor. We saw, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think, all men that we saw. I think maybe 5 or 6 guys that were going for the calendar year Triple Crown. So that was really cool to see, like everybody kind of meeting up. Northbound hikers were catching up with us. Southbound hikers were kind of going for it. So this section was really fun because we were starting to see more people on trail.
Okay.
Picture of me. Oh, you got it. Yeah, right.
And the last state in my northbound hike, Montana. So according to the Far Out app, Montana is 568 miles. And I entered, you know, kind of the more Montana, get rid of the Idaho border, August 5th. And I finished the trail on September 6th at the Waterton Monument. So I chose to do the Waterton Monument because it was an epic finish versus you can also finish on, I think it's called like Chief Mountain Pass. I think that's what it's called. Check me on that one and let me know in the comments if I got that wrong. I can't remember now because I didn't finish there, but you can choose one of the two, and the Chief Mountain Pass is kind of the more easier one to finish in if you're running low on time. But if you want to finish in an epic scenery by Waterton Lake, you can choose to do that, but it'll take a little more time because you kind of have to hike in and back out. So just keep that in mind. I didn't know that when I started hiking. I only found out about that like maybe when I was in Idaho. I started to look at the end to see what the situation was. I was like, oh, there's 2 places you can end. So that's totally up to you and depending on timing and that sort of thing. If the snow's coming in, maybe you want to just go to Chief Mountain Pass and be done with it. So, but yeah, Montana, as far as timing, was still, you know, the whole CDT is challenging, but there were quite a few ups and downs and all that sort of thing. Not like Colorado, but still the passes in Glacier National Park are no joke. Beautiful though. So the beauty might slow you down a little bit. It slowed me down. I was taking photos and everything, but definitely finished earlier than I thought. Because of the alternates. So there's quite a few alternates in this section you can take as well. So definitely keep your eye on the maps, the online maps, or the maps on Far Out as you use your navigation, and talk to hikers too, because they can have some really great tips on maybe how to make up some of the miles that you need to do, or make up some of the time that you need to make up. Okay, it's border day today. I can't believe it. Hasn't really hit me. I don't think it will hit me for a while. Okay, try not to die right now. Right before the border. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I'm a little speechless today. But I gotta get there first, right? I might be crawling to the terminus. We'll see. Stay tuned. Here we are. Woo! So there it is, my thoughts on timing for the CDT and what I learned as I hiked the trail. I hope this was helpful for you. If you're preparing to hike the trail, if you're preparing to section hike, do a full through hike in 1 year. Let me know in the comments if you have any more questions. I would love to hear from you, or if you would like me to cover another topic in the next video, another video, definitely leave the comments down below, and I go through everyone, I answer everyone, so I would love to hear from you. And if you're watching and you're a CDT alumni, I would love to hear from you too, and what maybe your struggles were with timing of the trail specifically, because I know a lot of people do, that's like on their mind the whole time in some cases. So if you have some insight as to how you handled the timing, would love to hear from you in the comments as well. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Yes. There we go. Pick us up.